gather uh, deeper knowledge and understanding of Agile. So today we have a wonderful speaker, a very good friend of mine also, and a very good friend to PMI, Yannick. Yeah, Yannick Arian. He's going to be speaking to us basically on. Can you see my screen? I'm sure you can see my screen. Okay, he's going to be speaking to us basically on Agile anti-patterns and myths. So, who is Yannick? Yannick is a strategic technology leader with over 20 years of experience working with C-level executives and having worked with some of the largest global software companies across England, United States, and Australia. Currently, he's engaged with the Australia government, and he has brought a lot of experience on based on his experience over these organizations and different types of organizations. There's a lot we're going to be learning to him concerning Agile meet. So for today's session, it's just going to be for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, we'll have a Q&A session. However, need to keep you abreast with the housekeeping rules. The first being that all participants, please ensure you mute and ensure that your videos are turned off. Also, feel free to continue networking within the chat box. And if there are questions, please submit on the chat box and put Q before your questions so that we can easily spot it. Also note that the session is going to be recorded and recordings and slides will be shared on emails after the session. Please have a great meeting and give us feedback at the end of the session. Having said this, I would like to pass over the mic to Yannick to continue the session. Yannick, over to you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Emeka, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me today to present. Let me start by sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. So the topic today is Agile anti-patterns and myths. I've broken that presentation into 3 topics. The first, as we mentioned, is Agile myths. Then we'll talk a bit about some Agile anti-patterns. And finally, I will give you some tips to help you guys in your organization to achieve greater agility. So as the number 7 is one of my favorite numbers, so I've added 7 myths, 7 anti-patterns, and 7 tips for you. So before I start on the first myth, so let me give you some context of where does that comes from. As part of my role in Canberra, Australia, I get to visit a lot of government departments and teams and talk about Agile and coach them and help them to achieve greater agility. And very often, depending on who I talk to, so it can be either executives or developers, I get different response on their views of Agile. Some of these responses resonate really well, and some doesn't. So what I found out is that there's a lot of misconception or misunderstanding about what Agile is about. And it's from both extremes. So I get sometimes some executives that are very conservative. They're already scared. They don't believe in Agile. And on the other spectrum, I get some Agilists who are what we call the purists. So they want to solve every problem with Agile. So this is where I started to put a list of some of these misconceptions. And tonight I'm going to give you 7 of these that are the most common. So let's start with a first myth. The first myth that I get most of the time is Agile is for software development only, for building software. And the fact is, if we think about Agile, it started about 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, when the manifesto was created. And since then, a lot of time has passed. There's been a lot of evolution, a lot of new frameworks and new ways of working that has allowed that mindset to be applicable in many other industries other than software development. And today, this is $1 trillion market. If we look at the 15th State of Agile report, we can see that the non-IT projects is doubling every year. Even during the COVID times, some pharmaceutical company has been involved in using Agile in order to build the vaccine. So saying that Agile is only for software is not 100% correct. Myth number 2, very often we tend to hear that, is Agile does not require any documentation. The fact is, if we look at the manifesto second value, what it states is working software over comprehensive documentation. So the word over is very important. Why? Because we say that, yes, we need documentation, but working software is more important. So nowhere in the Agile Manifesto or in the values, in the principles, we don't see that it states that we don't need to have any documentation. So most of the time, the teams, the individuals who are referring to no documentation, what I found out is that they try to use Agile as an excuse for not doing any documentation, for not planning, for not doing things in a structured way. Myth number 3 is Agile is a methodology. So I am doing Agile. But the fact is, Agile is a mindset. So you don't do Agile, you be Agile. You are Agile. So you create agility. And what Agile is about, it's defined by 4 values, 12 principles, and then manifested through many practices. So by adhering to these values, this is where you start to get the mindset. Once you have the mindset, you start to change the behavior. The way you behave is in an agile way, and then you adopt one of the practices that suit your organization. Myth number 4, agile means no or poor planning. So I tend to get that from some of the executives that are very conservative. They don't want to develop agile because their perception is there's no planning, or the planning is very poor in Agile. This is why they don't want to adopt Agile practices. So the fact is, Agile does planning, but it does it iteratively, progressively. Why? In order to respond to change or new priorities. In fact, when we think about it, is that there's a lot, maybe more planning in Agile because we do our daily stand-up, our daily sprint. So what that is about is to plan the day, to get everyone on the same page. We have a sprint planning meeting at the beginning of the Scrum. This again is planning. After a few sprints, we'll be releasing, so we do the sprint release. We also do the sprint retro. This is where we get the findings about what's working, what's not working well, what can be improved. So that's some sort of planning to say, how do we plan to work better? So saying there's no planning is not correct. Myth number 5, so that sometimes comes from the purists, is that everything can be solved in Agile, using Agile. techniques. But again, it's not 100% correct. So it depends on the nature of a project. So it's like choosing a tool. So you have a toolbox with different approach. So using Agile can be good where technology is far from certain and the requirements are not 100% known, or you will be changing priorities in your project. But if you're in a project where the requirements are very clear, you know exactly what you're doing, it's been done before, the technology is proven, it is simple, so the traditional model may be better. And then, of course, if you have a technology or you don't even know what the technology will be, you don't know what the goal, so sometimes it is what we call the chaotic end. So if you're in that situation, neither Agile nor the traditional methods will not be able to help you. So this is where we need to really understand, okay, use the right tool for the right reason. Myth number 6, Agile only works on small projects. So some organizations are embarking onto a massive digital transformation, so changing the whole organization, but they are not very sure whether they will use traditional, Agile, or what they are going to use. But the first response very often is, Agile is not going to work for us. But again, the fact is that Agile can scale to work on very large projects. We've got a lot of frameworks that has been developed, so everyone is familiar with SAFe, where we can use SAFe with a team of over 100 people. We also have Scrum of Scrums, Enterprise Scrums, and there's a lot more that you can find out to scale Agile. So saying that Agile works on small projects is not accurate. The last myth, myth number 7, people say it's very easy. We are going to implement Agile in our organization. We'll send the whole team on a week's training. They will be coming back. We will all be Agile. The matter of the fact is, as we mentioned before, Agile is a mindset. So shifting the mindset is not easy. Adopting new ways of working is not easy. For our executives to change their behavior so that they can empower their team, so that they can inspire their team, so that they can stop micromanaging their team is not easy. So this is what we call a shift in the culture. So that's not easy to implement. It doesn't happen over one day. So saying that we send the whole team on a training and then we'll be Agile and expect the results is not correct. So it is a journey. Now that we've got through the 7 myths, the next few slides will be about what I call anti-patterns. So if you Google anti-patterns, we will have all sorts of, everyone has different definition of what an anti-pattern is, what anti-pattern is about. So the first definition here is what I found on Wikipedia. But in summary, to make it into a simple way, what anti-pattern is, it is a bad habit. People do things, but it's not the proper way to do things in that particular way. It's just a bad habit that we need to stop. So very often when, again, so I talk to different teams, I visit them, I review projects, what I found is that a lot of bad habits has been anchored in these projects. And the result of these bad habits, why it's bad, is because it doesn't deliver value to the organization. It hinders progress. So when value is not being delivered, when things are not working as expected, what tends to happen is that the organization, the executive, the team, the people, they start to distrust Agile. They don't really believe in it anymore. And we have some negative consequences as a result. So the project will be stopped. We will stop adopting Agile. We go back into our traditional ways. So that's not a good outcome. So the first anti-pattern, I'm sure everyone will have seen it if you started to adopt Agile in your organization. You will see that the Scrum Master is acting as a team lead. So what do we mean is that the Scrum Master is directing the team on how to do their work, on how to write that piece of code in the database, on how to build that particular server. So the root cause of that is because very often the Scrum Master is a very senior team member who was the team lead or the senior developer, and he was promoted or somehow he became the Scrum Master. So how to avoid that is basically hire a Scrum Master from outside the organization when you're starting the new team. So this way you have someone who's experienced, who understands what the role of a Scrum Master is, and they will come with no bias towards the team. So they will trust the team and empower the team to work by themselves. Second anti-pattern is that the sprint duration keeps on changing. So I often see teams, they start with their first sprint, which is 2 weeks. The next sprint becomes 3 weeks. The next sprint after that becomes, there's no end date, it keeps on changing, it becomes chaotic. So the root cause of that is that very often there's no upfront planning. So before you start your project, before you start your sprint, you need to make sure that your backlog is mature. So what do we mean by the backlog being mature? Is that you have thought about all the different epics and the features and started to put the priorities, the business value for each of that, and really have your definition of ready, definition of done in these user stories. Other reason as well is very often the product owner is not trained. So if a product owner is new, he hasn't gone on any training, he won't know what is his role. So when we start the sprint, we will have some user stories that are not ready to be built. So this is why we keep on extending the sprint or changing the sprint, because mid-sprint we'll be having different user stories coming in and we are changing priorities. So how to avoid that is the first point is that we need to train our product owner. So we need to make sure in a project, when we start, the product owner is trained, the product owner is dedicated, and also the product owner has the knowledge of a business and is empowered to make decisions. So if this doesn't occur, it will lead to the sprint duration changing all the time. And why is it bad? It's because it will be hard to calculate the velocity of a team and predict the outcome of a project. Anti-pattern number 3, retrospective insight actions does not get acted on. So what I mean by that is that we'll have at the end of a sprint, the team are really happy and motivated, and they are going to perform their retrospective. As part of their retrospective, they will come up with a list of improvements that they have identified that needs to be done in order to add more value, in order to be more efficient in the next sprint. But what happened is that nothing is done about it. So when nothing is done about it, we don't get that improvement. So the status quo remains. We don't keep on improving. Some of our root cause is because either the team, the Scrum Master, or both of them have not been trained. They don't really understand the value of a retrospective, or they may not be empowered to make changes to the way they are working. Other reasons as well, very often, maybe they don't really care. So they don't care because they don't have a common goal. They are not working as a team. How do you resolve that? Is that we again, engage an external coach. Get an external coach to come here to help to bring the team together, to train the team, and that external coach will help to coach the senior management, your organization, so that the team is empowered to be able to act in order to make changes that will be beneficial to them. Anti-pattern number 4, developers working on side gigs. So what I mean by that is that you have a team that has agreed to work on a set of user stories, but mid-sprint you find they're working on their previous job. They're working on something else, not what has been agreed during the sprint. The root cause is because the organization is not fully on board with that. So what I mean is by that is that we've gathered a group of people, we formed a team, we agreed to run that project in Agile, but some of the team members were still part of their previous team, they're still part of their previous job. So what tends to happen, they get distracted, they get called to be able to help on their previous role because they are the most experienced developer. So to solve that, again, the team will need coaching, and very often, sometimes as well, you may need to reorg your organization. If you're forming a team by getting resources from different parts of the organization, we need to make sure that they are backfilled so that they don't get distraction, they don't get called to go back and do some of the work. Anti-pattern number 5, agile teams working extended and long hours. Very often you can see that the previous behavior, we have a really tight deadline, is getting near the end of a sprint. People are working really long hours. The root cause is organization culture, or user stories hasn't been sliced properly. So what I mean by that is that when we take the user story on board during the sprint planning, we need to understand what exactly do we need to build? How does it work? What is the definition of done? What are the tasks to be able to complete these user stories? So very often there are still a lot of unknowns. So this is what we call it's not sliced correctly. So it's something that looks simple, but in fact it's very complicated, and that gets noticed while we start to do the work. I shape team as well. So this is another root cause of people working long hours, is that very often you have one person that is the only database administrator or the only coder in the team. So we rely on that particular person. So which means there is a blocker if that person doesn't continue this job, and we rely on that person. So to solve that problem, we need to ensure that the backlog is ready. We spoke about that before. The backlog is mature, and we use the T-shaped team. So very important to use the T-shaped team. What T-shaped team is about is you have people in your team who can participate into all the different activities that needs to be done. They are cross-skilled, and they can be the expert in one particular field, but they can do other jobs as well. What that provides to the team is that you don't have a single point of failure. You don't have dependency on only one particular person. So to try to get your team in a T-shape is a really good initiative that you can do. Pattern number 6, micromanagement by the Scrum Masters over executives. Very often what we tend to see is that the executives want to check, how are you going to do that piece of code? How are you going to build that product? What are you doing every hour, every day, micromanaging them to the nth degree? So again, what tends to happen is that the senior team members, senior executives, they've been promoted to be the Scrum Master, or the culture as well very often hasn't been changed. So it's still having the old culture of working. So in order to solve that, hire some Scrum Master from outside the organization, and that Scrum Master will be coaching the team, which would include the executives as well. Anti-pattern number 7, the product owner is not there. The product owner is one of the most critical roles in an agile project, because the team would be going to the product owner for clarifications, for approvals of the sprint. So all the time when we need to groom the backlog. But what again we found out is that why this is happening, why the product owner is not there, is absent, because we are not fully committed. Why they are not fully committed? Because they're still working on their previous job, or they're in 2 roles now. They are doing their previous job, plus we've allocated them the task to be the product owner. So it is a full-time role. So what we need to ensure in that situation is to make sure that we have a dedicated product owner who is really committed to be here to support the team, and who also has the business knowledge. That's very important, because we don't want the product owner to go back to the executives or to the team, to many people, to make simple decisions. So they need to be empowered. They need to be able to make the decision when the team needs a decision. So we spoke about the 7 myths and the 7 anti-patterns. I hope that this was useful. Now, what I want to leave you guys today is just give you 7 tips on how you can help your organization to achieve greater agility. Tip number 1, so now when we start to link that with the myths and we start to link it with anti-patterns, when we find out one of the most important things, hire an agile coach. Hire people who are experienced, who've done it before, in order to teach and coach your organization and help you move towards obtaining that agile mindset and adopting practices that will work from the start, so that you don't get these bad habits. Very important. Get the right help. Tips number 2, once you have a coach, he will help you to create your agile ways of working. So if you look at discipline agile, there's lots of information, there's a lot of emphasis on agile ways of working. So what agile ways of working is in discipline agile is that we understand every team is different, every organization is different. So let's tweak some of the practices that you want to adopt that will work for you to make you agile, and make sure that the way that you work is aligned with the Agile Manifesto. So what I mean by that is that Agile Manifesto, basically, it encourages working normal hours, not working extra long hours. So we need to make sure that we don't have some practice where people are working 15 or 60 hours per week. So make sure that it is sustainable. Tips number 3, ensure that the team is committed. So having few individuals together is a group of people. It is not a team. So we need to make sure that people are working as a team. When we start to work as a team, they become committed. They become committed in delivering value for the organization. So how do you do that? We need to make sure that we have servant leaders that understand what servant leadership is. So they empower the team, they inspire the team to have a common vision of why we need to solve a problem, and believe that they can solve a problem. They have an open mindset that they want to innovate, and also have a product owner that's dedicated, so that everyone is working together. Tips number 4, executive must act as a servant leader. So moving into agile delivery does not only require the team to be trained, to be coached, it's also the executives. Changing their behavior happen from the top as well. So the executives need to be willing to change. They need to be responsive to Agile. They need to understand what their role is. Their role is also important. It's not only about the team. Tips number 5 is one of our principles, Agile principles. At regular intervals, the team must reflect on how to become more effective and choose to adjust its behavior accordingly. So that's one of the most important principles that, to me, I believe, and in most of the Agile practices, it is about looking back on the ways you're working. So is the ways of working? Is the way that my team interaction is working? Is the process working? So it's the reflection on how are we doing and how can we improve? How do we become better? So this is in Scrum, it's implemented as the retrospective. We also have a PDCA, which is the Plan, Do, Check, Act. So there are different ways to do that, but the point is that at regular intervals, that can be during your daily sprint sometimes as well, just think, is that the best time to do our daily sprint, or can we do it in a different time to make things more efficient if people are running late? At the end of a sprint to see, okay, how did we deliver that project? Anything we can learn from it? Anything we can adjust? So this is what makes you become more and more mature. And by becoming more mature, so it increases your velocity and you deliver more value for the organizations. This is very critical. So make sure that you reflect and you act on it as well. It's not good if you say, yes, we need to do this, we need to improve, but you don't improve. So acting on the improvement initiatives that comes from the team is very important. Tips number 6, start an Agile community of practice in your organization. So what an Agile community of practice is, it is some informal meeting that the team people would have in an organization once a fortnight or once a month. So that is a practice that starts to help you guys to share the knowledge with everyone who is interested. And what it does, it creates trust in Agile, trust in the team, trust in each other. And then this is how you start to create a new culture of learning. The new ways of working in the future will be the learning worker. Very important. If you look at what the learning worker is, people need to be able to have the ability to learn new skills really quickly because the world is changing. Tips number 7, the last tips, is that ensure your organization, process, and structures are aligned. Very, very important. Very often what I can see is that the team is delivering value. They are storming, building a lot of products, and then we cannot deploy to production. Why? Because we have to follow a really complex change management process that takes weeks. Or we need to hire a new team member that takes weeks, or we need to get some reviews by the policy team or the legal team that takes weeks. So there's no point to build something that cannot be used or cannot be used immediately. So there's no value in that. So it's very important to make sure that you look at the whole process from when there's a business need, we call the ideation, to delivery in production, the customer using it, to be lean, to be streamlined, so that the flow doesn't get disrupted along the way. So implementing Agile in your organization, you need to think it from an end-to-end perspective, not only how do I build that piece of software. So the result, if you start to act on some of these tips that I've given you, is that what it will gives to your customer is some delight. The customer will be delighted with your services, the products that you're doing, and it will create a new capability in your organization. So that capability will allow you to respond quickly and help you to develop innovative ideas. So you'll be empowered to come up with new ideas, try new things, and at the end, you will become more efficiencies and having more customers that are happy will mean more money, more profit for your organization. So thank you for listening to me today. So now open to answer any question that you may have.
Thanks so much, Yannick. we've just had a couple of questions that came in on the chat, and one is from I think Eva, saying there's a perception of developing in pieces without understanding the end result. How do you handle this?
Yes, that's very common. So this is again some of the anti-patterns and myths is that people, so when you see a few teams, they start to do things in an ad hoc way. I call it unstructured. And they use it to say, I'm doing Agile, I don't need to think about the end result. It's very important to think about the end result. So we start by having a vision. The vision is that we have a problem, we will be solving it. So what are we going to solve it and how we are going to solve it? So putting it in perspective, so in working government department, it's very clear we are going to build a piece of software, we are going to build a solution to solve that particular problem. That's defined first. And then we start to break that problem into releases. So we will be releasing the first release, just say in June 2023, and then the next release will be 6 months later, December 2023. And then, so now we've got a plan, a very, very high level on when the releases will be. We agree on the sprint time. Is it 2 weeks or is it 3 weeks? So we can start to calculate the number of sprints, and then we start to break it down into the main epics. So if we want to build a portal, we know we'll have a portal, we will have a new backend system. So we start to break it into epics, and then we start to decompose it into features. This is where we can start to sequence that piece of work so that, yes, we know when we are going to deliver, and then we start to work, okay, what we are going to deliver during that time. It goes into a structured approach in a consistent way as well, so that we can calculate our velocity, we can improve, we can see if our velocity is decreasing or if it is increasing. So this is how you start to basically have an end vision in mind. So you don't go and do some piece of code and then afterwards you're going to find, oh, let's do another piece of code. So you want to make sure that we don't create technical debt along the way as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Yannick. There was another question from Moise asking, can Agile be used on construction type projects like facilities?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the misconceptions is that Agile cannot be used in construction. So as I mentioned before, it is a mindset. So a mindset of, I want to deliver value. And that mindset comes from the 4 values and the 12 principles. So in construction, I'm sure when you look at the processes, the way you're doing things, is that there's a lot of improvement that you can do because some of the things that we are doing doesn't add value. So instead of looking at people say, oh, we cannot go and change our mind if we've started to build a building. It's not about changing the mind. It's about the way we go and do the building. Can we do it in a more efficient way? So that's the mindset that we need to have. Can we delight the customer? The customer come and say, no, I want a different color kitchen. So can we take that on board, or are we very rigid about that? You've selected a kitchen 2 years ago. Now what we are going to build it, you cannot change the style of a kitchen. Some things can be changed, and yes, something cannot be changed. We need to factor that into our plan, into our agile ways of working, because we've got legislation that we need to adhere to. We've got some, maybe if we are doing a building, we need to have our plan fully defined, and then we need to submit that to the approval authority to approve. But we can start by looking at small steps, and then hopefully maybe you can have some incremented plan that you can give to the council. So that mindset, this is when we talk about end-to-end. So that will come in the future if you start to have a community of practice to talk about Agile in your construction organization. You can bring people from the council. They can work with you to say, okay, so let's see how we can make it in such a way that when things need to change, we can make that change. In Agile, we call it embracing change. We'll embrace that change easily instead of being very rigid and fixed mindset. So that's the idea.
Thanks, Yannick. There is one more question from Wisal asking, how can we engage people to be present in the stand-up meeting? For example, if there is any tip, so the team respect the timing and the Scrum Master in the first place.
Yes, correct. So that's again some of the anti-patterns that I've seen is that people are not present because they are coming late, they have other priorities. So very often there's few root cause for that. The first thing is that when you create your ways of working, we need to work as a team. What I mean by the team is that this is very important, is that when we decide something, the team has to decide. We don't go and impose to the team to say the daily stand-up will be at 8:30 every day. So we tell the team, guys, you all may have different priorities. You may have to drop your kids at school, or sometimes you're late, you may have doctor's appointment. So what is the best time and the best day to do the daily stand-up? Yeah, the daily stand-up will be every day, but what is the best time to do the daily stand-up? Let them work together to agree to say, yes, maybe 10 o'clock is the best time because some people are late. So that's the number one. So once they agree among a team, they be committed. They will own that decision. It is their decision. And then if it's not working, as part of your retrospective, you will find out that very often we have 50% of a team members attending the daily sprint. So why is that? What is the root cause? Okay, maybe we can change the timings. The second reason is that the team are not committed. They are not committed, either they don't believe in the project. Why they don't believe in the project? Because servant leadership, the management, has not acted in an influential way. So they are not influenced. Say, yes, they believe in that project. Yes, they realize what they are doing, why they need to do that. So that's one of the other reason. And then the third reason, very often they are doing other jobs as well. So you have another important manager calling them, say, this is the first thing you need to do in the morning. So that will come by coaching the senior executives and also some reorg so that people are committed and people believe in what they are doing. So that's my answer for that.
Thanks, Yannick, for that response. There's Tesema, who is saying excellent presentation, but he's still not convinced that Agile can be applicable to non-software development projects because in your presentation you mentioned terms like Scrum Master, Sprint developers, product owners, which are related to software. So maybe some clarity around that.
Yes, correct. So I give you an example. So I agree 100%. So what happened is that Agile started by software developers 20 years ago. So a lot of these practices like Scrum, so they were already there. So and they are very popular towards software development because this is the problem that this guy tried to solve. So, but now if we fast forward, we look at today. So in most organizations, they need to change. They need to transform. Why? Because there's more demand for products, for efficiency, for services. The world is going faster. So as a result, we need to find new ways of working. So this is what we call being agile. So to be able to shift the priorities, to be able to deliver things faster when there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of unknowns. We call that the VUCA world that we live in now. So it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex. So we need to have new ways. And yeah, of course, some of the things that we can't use Agile yet, I don't know if you are building some missile or something, we really need to plan a lot. It's very complicated. And some stuff is that if I'm building a car, we need to build the same car all the time. It's a factory. So we know what we are doing. We know how much it's going to cost. There's no point to go and do it in Agile because it's working well. So if something is working well, don't change it. If everyone is happy with what we are producing, that don't change it. But if we are in a circumstance where we don't 100% know what we need because things are changing, and we need to be able to adopt our ways of working. We need to be able to change our priorities. Technology is not certain. Yep, Agile may be fit. So as if you look on Google, so to develop a vaccine, basically before, it used to take 7 years, but we managed to develop the COVID vaccine in about 1 year. How did that happen? Is that we've changed the way we used to do things. And the pharmaceutical industry, they have acknowledged that. So, and they are changing the way by, they are calling it being agile. So that's my answer for that.
Awesome. There's one from Kabaj asking, what are the projects that can't be agile?
So some of the projects, just say if you look at a company that has been building houses. So in Australia and here, so there are some house company, they have different models of house. It's like a menu. You have house A, house B, house C. And you just select this type of house. The only thing that you can change maybe the color or the style of kitchen, even that they will give you a few options. So they know exactly how many materials they need to build the house, how much it's going to cost, and how long it will take. And this is their business model. And they've been doing that for many years. And they are happy with the profit. The quality of the build is really good. Customers are happy. So there's no need to change. So what's one example? In some manufacturing organizations, that's already lean manufacturing. They are building a product and everything is known. Or often I see in government, we have mainframe developers. So the technology is very simple. They've been doing that for the past 40 years. So they know exactly what they are doing, how they are doing. So there's no point to move towards agile in some of these circumstances. So once you're equipped with a mindset, you understand the pros and cons, you can really apply it to the right circumstance. As I mentioned before, is that it's a tool. You need to use the right tool for the right job. Yep, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Yannick. There's one more. Seems to be a lot of questions. There's one more from Temilolu asking, some product owners are functional managers and some critical decisions will require recourse to senior leadership. What are your thoughts?
Yes, that's exactly right. So this is what I mentioned before, is that starting a team, assigning someone to be the product owner is not going to work. So first we need coaching. So you need coaching at every level of an organization, including senior leadership. So to tell them what is their role. So when we embark onto an agile journey, product owner, this is what your role is. This is what you need to do. You need to go through the backlog. You need to spend time in the backlog. You need to go through every user story to really understand what are the priorities, etc. So that's one thing. So the second thing is that you need the leadership to act as servant leader. They need to understand. So, and then they need to be committed. Very often you will see product owner or executive say, yeah, yes, I understand, I agree, but they don't act on it. They still behave the old way. So we need to shift that. And then also what you can do as well, we need to look at the characteristics. If you have a product owner, so you can see the type of individual doesn't want to change. That person is saying yes, but they are not going to do it. So you need to pick the right individual to be the product owner. You need to pick the right executive as well. If you look at an executive that's very, very strong on his views, he's or her, so very conservative, they don't want to change. So you need to find another executive or another sponsor that has an open mind. So very important to choose the right people to basically inspire and lead that change. Otherwise, it won't happen, or it will be very, very painful for you to make it work.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks, Yannick. We've exhausted all the questions that were on the chat.
Any more questions? So So I think I touch back again on that daily sprint as well. So very often, so I've got some slides, maybe next time I can talk a bit about the daily sprint. So we've talked about doing the daily sprint, but again, some anti-patterns of a daily sprint. What the daily sprint is not about is people don't turn up because sometimes it becomes a status meeting. Sometimes what happens as well, it doesn't add any value. So I've seen daily sprint with 50 people. So 50 people, just imagine how much that costs for organization. So which is what tend to happen is that when one person is talking about the work, the other person were on their phone, going on Facebook. So there's no value. So other thing that I've noticed in daily sprint, people are saying, yesterday, I went and created that script, I deployed it, I tested it, I did this, I did that. So it becomes more as a status meeting. And then the next person is speaking, oh, my ear has done 10 things. Now, if I do one thing, I will look bad. So I need to go and think. I need to say 11 things, or I need to tell 10 things. Otherwise, people think I haven't done any work. So having this type of competition is unhealthy. So it's not about a competition about how many things you've done. It is about sharing the knowledge, what your teams needs to know, so that the workflow. It's another way of planning. If a developer has finished a piece of code, why is he telling the team in the daily sprint that he's finished that piece of code so that the tester can test it? The tester is aware that this piece of code is ready to be tested, or it will be ready today. So as the developer, I can tell the team that, okay, I'm going to finish that code at 12 today. So what that means, the tester in his head, he can think, oh, good, so I can start to test at 1 o'clock after lunch, instead of wasting time to find out the next day that the code is ready. So this is the value of a daily sprint. So if you have an agile mindset, so when you start to approach the daily sprint, you need to think, okay, the conversation that I'm having, what I'm saying, is that adding value? Does the team needs to know that? Is it valuable to them? If not, don't say it. Just say only thing that will add value that people need to keep the flowing. So that's other tips as well. Any more questions?
So nothing has come in on the chat. If there's any question, feel free to unmute and just ask directly to Yannick.
Yes, so I've left a QR code. I don't know if you can take a picture of that. My LinkedIn, please follow me on LinkedIn. And you've got my email address in there. So feel free to send me an email address. So I've got a lot of materials as part of my job. I review a lot of teams in Canberra. Canberra is the capital of Australia, so where all the big government departments are. So I'm currently working on building a framework on how to assess agile projects to, I call it, to recover. So there's a lot of projects that go wrong, and very, very senior executives needs to have an assurance on, do we continue the project, or do we can the project, or what do we do about it? And how do we get an assurance, and what's the level of assurance? Is it 50%, 80% that that project will deliver value, will deliver it on its intent or not? So there's a lot of materials that I have. That if you have some problems, happy to share, happy to work with you guys. So connect with me.
Thank you so much, Yannick. This was very insightful. There's so many thank you messages on the chat. This was very insightful, and I'll just ask everyone that is on the meeting to connect with Yannick. Should you have any follow-up questions that you would like to discuss with him, connect on LinkedIn also, and let's take the conversation forward. Otherwise, we'll end today's session at this point, and thank you so much for attending. We will be able to share this recording and the presentation after the meeting, probably by next week. We should be sending that to you over the email. We will be able to create PDUs also for this session that we'll be able to claim on your end, and we will share information about that on the email that we will send. Our next Agile session will be next month on the 3rd of November. we will be able to we'll sharing more information about that, so you can register, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yannick, for making this time for this session. I know it's
Thank
too
you.
early.
Thank you, my
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Jan.